Our next speaker is Mark Orlando, Chief Technology Officer for the Raytheon Company. Mark establishes the technical vision for Raytheon cyber protection solutions and ensures they are in alignment with the business vision of that great company. Prior to joining Raytheon, Mark advanced through the technical ranks as a security analyst and technical lead in a variety of operations environments. Those include leading security operations teams at the White House, the Department of Energy, and at the Pentagon. Mark's got his degree from George Mason University, but more importantly, he's a former artillery guy, NCO in the Marine Corps. So be nice.
Thank you for that introduction. Very encouraged to see the representation we have in the room here today. Of course, it's a very timely and important discussion, and probably touch on some of the same themes that some of my fellow speakers have touched on today, and I think some of them are truly universal, whether you're a practitioner, technical person, public sector or private sector. It really doesn't matter as long as you're part of this discussion. My group at Raytheon was an early innovator in proactive threat hunting. That is, using investigative tools and methods to find highly skilled and often hidden threats in computer networks. We took this approach because we saw a direct correlation between the ubiquity of computer systems, networks, applications, the connected nature of things in the business world, and the rising skill and persistence of cyber attackers. We knew that simply waiting for evidence of a successful attack and then responding was not enough after the damage had already been done. We needed to continuously hunt for precursors to those damaging attacks and the conditions where attacks were likely to occur, and then take swift action before the damage could be done, or at least as quickly as possible to minimize the damage. Now, operational technologies, or OT, like those found in our electric grid, and some of the control systems that we've been talking about today, they're not the same as information technology, but we can draw some parallels between the two when we talk about attacks and defense. Now, in both cases, attacks tend to come after an information gathering phase, and I think we just heard about a little bit of that, where the attacker will attempt to learn more about the intended target, whether that's the organization that they're targeting, the operator they're targeting, the control systems they're targeting, and then seek to potentially compromise staging targets and then move on to their ultimate objective. And these are the kinds of behaviors, and I think Casey just mentioned this, that are pretty common to most of these kinds of sophisticated attacks, regardless of the tools they use or the infrastructure they use or the way that they go about doing it. And as with IT, OT infrastructure that's not managed well, maybe not managed at all, or poorly segmented from other systems, it can be vulnerable to disruption and tampering and automated threats like malicious code or some of the modular types of toolkits that some of my fellow speakers have already mentioned today. Now, while the threat is very real, and I think anyone who's followed the news or been anywhere near this industry in the last few years knows that the vulnerability is truly there. I think the good news that we can take into this fight is that our energy sector systems are a little bit more defensible than our IT systems are on the whole. They're more highly regulated, they're designed for resilience, much more so than most IT infrastructures that we encounter in our day-to-day operations. And that truly makes them more defensible, not impenetrable. In the past, I think the esoteric nature of most industrial control systems and a lack of standardization in communication protocols and design and deployment has provided a measure of security against cyber attacks. So in effect, security through obscurity. From an attacker perspective, unless mistakes are made in how these systems are architected or how they're managed, I think we heard some examples of that a few moments ago, it's still quite difficult in most cases to make a jump from an information technology system, a computer network, to an operational network. And that's certainly helpful from a defensive perspective. Now, when that is possible, if an attacker can find his or her way into the operational network, the operational system, it's still very difficult to understand how to interact with those operational systems in any meaningful way, to understand what commands to give, or defending the grid and other critical infrastructure, which is, at its foundation, building and equipping a workforce with the skills to instrument these kinds of systems, make sure that they're monitored effectively, identify these precursors to attacks, and analyze the digital evidence when attacks and other disruptions occur. Things like understanding that when a staging target, potentially a partner company or a supplier, is compromised, we need to look at that kind of in totality and understand that when we respond to that intrusion or that incident or that breach, it might not be just about that target. We need to understand kind of the ecosystem that is put at risk through that compromise and understand what we need to do to mitigate the larger aggregate risk. I think trained practitioners are a key and currently a very scarce ingredient in a solution that, of course, will also include technology and processes that are tailored to industrial control systems in the power and utility sector, and frankly, in numbers far greater than what we have today in the workforce. At Raytheon, we've developed creative ways to build and equip a cyber workforce and to address the lack of experienced analysts and engineers and threat hunters that we see today in the cyber job market. And we've been successful largely thanks to our partnerships with academia and the public sector. I think we've heard several times today about partnerships and collaboration and information sharing. But I would summarize those kinds of initiatives in really three focus areas. The first is to build the right training curricula, whether that's in academia, building the right course material and instruction, or whether that's on-the-job training, building the kind of security training and awareness curricula that we need to inform both practitioners, operators, system owners about the threats that exist and how they work at a high level. The second focus area is to train or to incentivize operators and system owners to maintain that awareness of cyber threats. So we see this in the corporate world today and in the government, where we train our users about cyber threats and to at least be aware that they can be targeted, how these attacks work against